ERSA. Hopefully you've been to this meeting before. Today's agenda is quite packed. We've got two really great speakers from two ERSA members, Career Connect and Resurgo. So we'll get on to them. Just quickly, I've got a couple of things from ERSA's point of view, and then we've got one sort of any other business that we're going to do at the beginning before we start the event proper. As you may have heard or seen in your mail from our mail shots, we're currently working on a research project about the sort of history of youth employment interventions in the UK. And as part of that, we are running four roundtables on the 18th and 19th of March about some specific employment programs. These are targeted at people who sort of directly delivered these programs, and we're going to do a facilitate discussion to try and draw out some of that evidence to include in our report. They're all four of them on the ERSA event right now, which I'm just going to link in the chat. So if you want to go through the programs we're covering, the European Social Fund and Building Better Opportunities Programme, UK Shared Prosperity Fund for young people, the New Deal for young people, and the Future Jobs Fund. So please sign up if you worked on those programs and if you'd like to attend. If you can't attend but you'd still like to sort of give us some evidence, then please feel free to get in touch with youth@ersa.org.uk and we can facilitate that over email. So that's everything from the ERSA front. I'm just going to call on Ben Brody from Impetus, who hopefully is here, and he's going to just give a little bit of information about their next funding round.
I am here. Hi. Thanks, Jack, for allowing an early AOB in the meeting. I realise it's taken them a bit. So my name's Ben. I'm an investment director at Impetus. I can see familiar faces on the call. Look forward to hearing from Sam later. I just wanted to say in this forum that Impetus we are going out with a grant round in a few weeks' time, looking for organisations that support young people who are not in education, employment or training into work, through the delivery of skills interventions, and we'll be prioritising vocational skills intervention, so i.e. focus on a particular sector. In brief, I mean, being an Impetus partner, it's £100,000 a year, it's initial first year, get lots of hands-on support from people like me. Like typically we have long-term partnerships. I think we work with Resurgo for something like 10 years or maybe more, as well as a kind of network of peer learning. So more information will be coming out. There's already a post we post on LinkedIn, but there's more information in a couple of weeks, like much more detail in terms of eligibility and criteria, but really keen that we get strong applications from organisations supporting young people into employment.
Sorry, Ben, I think you got caught up in us muting people coming in, so you might just want to repeat that last sentence. Apologies.
I was still muted. That's all right. So organisations supporting young people into employment through skills, really interested to hear from you. More information to come. Any questions, let me know. But yeah, look forward to hopefully getting some strong applications. Thank you. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Really appreciate that. Okay, so now we will make a start on the event proper. And up first we have Gary Mundy from Career Connect. So I will hand over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Jack. I'm just going to share my screen, which I practiced a moment ago, and it seemed to work. So hopefully it works again now. Here we go. Can you see that, Jack? If you let me know.
Yes.
You can.
That's great.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, I can't see people's hands or anything like that. I'll just hear things or see questions. I'll just hear things popping away in the background, so apologies. But very happy to take any questions or conversation points at the end. But I'll just run through them as they are, and I won't pause. But Jack, if you see something that you think it's worth stopping for, either somebody's got a hand up or you see a question that you think is actually worth pausing to have a conversation, just let me know, and I will stop temporarily. Okay, so I'm going to talk about three things. First of all, the ONS data that came out last week on the latest NEET figures. Most of you are probably familiar with that, but there's just a couple of things of interest that we picked up in there that I just want to share with this forum. And then after that, I want to link that to a piece of work we're doing at the moment, a piece of research looking at the experiences of young people with social, emotional, mental health support needs in their transitions from school to post-16 education and training. And there's a couple of slides that come from that piece of work, which we'll be releasing later in the year, not too long from now, I hope, which I think are relevant to the latest NEET figures, and just to share some of our thinking about why that is. And then from that lead into a short discussion about the thinking that we've been doing around the Gatsby benchmarks for careers and IAG provision in schools and colleges, and how we think that a similar approach, a similar sort of set of benchmarks could be very useful for trying to tackle this issue of the growing numbers of young people who are NEET. So those are the three things I'm going to try and link together coherently. And I think I've got about 15, 20 minutes. So I'll try not to run over that. So to start with, this is just a summary of the data that came out last week. And this is showing the NEET figures 16 to 24-year-olds, just looking at the October-December comparable quarters back to October 2021. And you can see here that you've got third year-on-year increase, rather depressingly. I think it's about 1 in 8 young people now, 16 to 24-year-olds who are NEET. It's about 100,000 increase on 12 months ago, and about 250,000 increase from 2021 when the world was emerging from COVID. I know there are issues and ongoing issues with the labour force survey data, but I've taken these numbers in good faith because they are the best that we have. But there's another discussion now, I think, about how we could or should be using this data. But for today's purpose, I've taken them in good faith that they are accurate, or at least if there are weaknesses, that the weaknesses are consistent, so the trends at least tell us something useful. So that was the overview, but then I just want to look at a couple of things that we picked up on that we found interesting. So this is on the right-hand side. So this is looking at the same data, but broken down between 18 to 24-year-olds on the right, and then the 16 to 17-year-olds on the left. And you can see that trend of an increase is applicable across both of those groups. The trend in the 18 to 24-year-olds seems fairly consistent, but rather worryingly, what we see in the 16 to and 17-year-olds, particularly in the last year, is a really steep increase. So 31% increase from 61,000 to 80,000 over the last year for that 16 to 17-year-old group. And we do find that very worrying. And I think with the current policy focus being around, with the youth guarantee and youth trailblazers, there's a lot of focus on that 18 plus age group. But for us, this is a reminder that we really shouldn't be losing focus on those 16 and 17-year-olds as well at the same time. It's not to say that we should be prioritizing them, but we should definitely not be losing focus on them. And one thing to keep an eye on is whether that sort of rather steep increase over the last year plays through into a similar sort of increase. Does that sort of foreshadow similar increases in that 18 to 24-year-old group to come, and ongoing increases from here onwards? So we found that interesting, if again a little bit depressing. The second thing to look at that jumped out at us is looking at the within that NEET group, the numbers that are unemployed versus inactive. And sorry, just heard myself on echo there for a moment. And again, what you see is a different pattern between the 18 to 24-year-olds on the right and the 16 and 17-year-olds on the left. So on the right-hand side, you've got that same sort of proportion between unemployment and inactivity. It's fairly consistent, some small changes, but fairly consistent year on year. But what we're seeing with 16, 17-year-olds, particularly in the last year, is a huge hike in those that are classified as being unemployed, and actually more now classified as being unemployed rather than being inactive. And when you go back to that previous screen and look at that leap between over the last year, most of that seems to be accounted for by an increase in the number of young people who are unemployed, so seeking employment in perhaps an unfavourable labour market, and that raises questions for us about why that is. Is that because of a shortage of jobs, or is it that the education and training provision post 16 is starting to look a little different and more challenging for that group? So we don't know all of the reasons for that, but it definitely raises questions, and again, something we think is worth keeping an eye on. So that's the ONS data, and just as I said, a couple of things that we picked out of that we thought were of interest and worth keeping a look at in the future. So before I talk about this graphic, I'll just say a little bit about the research that we're doing. So we're looking primarily at the local authorities in the Northwest where Career Connect operate. And we've been looking at the experiences of young people with social, emotional, and mental health support needs as they transition from school to post-16 provision. And one of the things we've been looking at there is data which tracks cohorts of year 12s and year 13s over the year and their movements in and out of different kinds of provision and in and out of NEET. And this graph is using that data to show what proportion of those young people had any time spent NEET during that academic year, so year 12 or year 13. And we've looked at, so at the top, this is in order of percentage from lowest to highest. And at the top, no surprise there, I guess, but young people with no education healthcare plan or receiving SEND support is the lowest group, 7.9%. And then that goes through to young people with education, health and care plans and who have SEM, social, emotional, mental health as their primary support need. And that's 38.1%. So you can see there, you've got this slope of increasing risk of NEET, depending on whether they've got SCN, whether they've got EHCPs, whether they have SEMH support needs, and then whether you've got an EHCP and SEMH support needs. And that group is particularly a particularly high risk of NEET. So that's alarming enough in itself. But when you combine that with the next slide I'm going to show you, which is again looking at those 8 local authorities in aggregate, and this is looking at the number of young people with social and emotional mental health support needs and an EHCP amongst the school age population. So this is just looking at the school age population. But the point of this is to show how substantial the growth has been in that cohort over the last since 2016, 2017 is what I'm showing here. But those increases are going up year on year on year, and there is as part of a trend with number of young people with SEND and EHCPs overall is going up, but this particular group within that SEN. The SEN cohort is growing more rapidly. So you've got a group here, rapidly growing group of young people coming through schools and coming into that sort of post-16 provision, who have very high risk of NEET, and their numbers are getting greater each year. So for us, when we look at thinking back to the headline of the NEET figures from the ONS data. This group of young people with social, emotional, mental health support needs are, we think, one of the factors. The growing number of people with those support needs is one of the factors that is driving those numbers up. And I think our view is that unless any activity or policy initiatives that are taken to address NEET, if they don't work and don't address and support this group in particular, they're very unlikely to be successful. So so that's linking. It's just fortuitous that we're doing this work, and then at the same time the ONS data came out, and we're obviously, because we're looking at both of those pieces of data at the same time, to us we could see what seems to be a link there. The other thing that we've looked at as part of that work is starting to think about what possible policy responses could be. And one of the things that really stands out for us in that is that an increasing number of young people are either absent from or have very intermittent connection with school. And we don't have data on this, but our sense is that young people with social, emotional, mental health support needs are probably a large proportion of those groups. So the top graphic here is showing the numbers of young people who are electively home educating in the 8 local authorities where we're working. And you can see the extent of that increase between autumn 22 and autumn 24. This is using DFE data. And then at the bottom, we've got the number of young people who are persistently absent from school. And again, you see a huge hike there. That's going back slightly confusing using different years on my graphics here. Apologies, Ben, not best practice, but I hope you'll forgive me. That's going back to 2018-19 up to 23-24, which is when the latest data is available. But you can see, again, large numbers of people who are persistently absent. I could have added to this, in the interest of time and space, I didn't, but I could have added data on young people who are missing in education and then also school exclusions as well. And they both show a similarly sort of depressing trend, which those numbers are growing. So I think for us, the point here is that any sort of action that's taken to try and reduce risk of need, if it only focuses on schools or young people in schools, it's going to have a sort of diminished effectiveness, because you've got these growing numbers of young people that are either outside of school entirely or have very sort of limited or limited engagement with school. So there's a need to look more broadly. That's the point we would make there. So I'm going to make a bit of a leap here to thinking about what some of the solutions could be, and what we can learn perhaps from all that's been done with the Gatsby benchmarks over the last 10 years around the provision of careers and IAG support within schools and colleges. And what that's done has brought real sort of clarity to those schools and colleges about what good provision looks like and what's required to achieve it. So I've got the purpose of this isn't to go through the benchmarks, it's just to set it up, but you've got the 8 benchmarks there. You've got the Compass tool, of course, which schools and colleges can use to self-assess themselves using criteria under each of these 8 headings. And then that data is published and schools can see where they sit and what proportion are achieving which benchmarks. And it seems that that's been really successful in driving up, improvements in careers provision within schools. So that's excellent. So that got us to thinking about whether a similar approach could be used, a similar set of benchmarks, a similar kind of framework could be used for provision of services for young people at risk of NEET and who are NEET. And that's was something that's sort of been growing, a topic of conversation for us over the last probably 2 years or so. And I think that's come about in several ways. So it's partly come because over the last 2-3 years, the research we've been doing looking at what some of the challenges are around NEET prevention and what effective practice looks like, and various pieces of research we've done around that to see what we think is working. It wasn't earlier this year, it was last year now, wasn't it? It was still slow to think there's 2025, but not quite a year ago, May 24, we had a consultation process and we had a roundtable at the House of Lords, and to talk about this around issues around evidence, about best practice around careers provision, and partly around NEET prevention. And one of the things that came from that very clearly was this sort of lack of a clarity about what good looks like in terms of NEET prevention. So again, that started to, for us, bring that picture or that need into sharper focus, that need for a set of benchmarks. And again, we started thinking about Gatsby and how some of the learning from Gatsby might be applied to this area and to this problem. And then September last year, we had a best practice workshop with the 8 authorities that we work with in the Northwest, to start to look at this and start to see what some of those benchmarks might look like. And then from that, we did a presentation we ran a workshop, at the Career Development Institute conference in November with Education Development Trust. I don't know if there's anybody from Education Development Trust on this call, but must credit the excellent work that they've been doing in West Yorkshire, where they are also looking at this issue about best practice and what some of the components of best practice might look like. And reassuringly, what was coming out of the work that EDT are doing in West Yorkshire and the work that we've been doing in the Northwest, albeit in working in slightly different ways, but the conclusions that we were coming to were very similar. So we got together and we ran a workshop with attendees at the CDI workshop just to present our initial thinking on what some of these benchmarks could look like and what the benefits of having that sort of benchmark approach might be for NEET prevention. And then I'll come on. So here we go. So this is our draft set of 8 benchmarks. I won't go through them in detail because I think that could be a whole session in itself. But this is our to share our emerging thinking about what those benchmarks could be. So I'll run through them very quickly. So the first one is around the importance of targeted and early intervention and having a program for that, and making sure that those that are most at risk are being supported early. So in that, we would say from year 9, probably, as in that build up to that transition from school to post-16 education and training. We think it should involve impartial advice and guidance from a qualified careers professional. The third point we would make is around accurate tracking. So at the moment, DfE obviously track and report on not just NEET, but also the numbers that are not known. And for some authorities, those numbers are still very high. So we think having a really clear strategy about keeping your not known figures very, very low is really important, because if you don't have early identification and tracking, then you're definitely not providing support services to those young people. The fourth one is really around making sure that you've got education and training provision in your area that is aligned with needs. And that's goes back looking at the changing cohort of young people that are coming through from school and making sure that you've got that sort of landscape of provision is not just about number of places, but is actually places on opportunities that are going to meet the needs of those young people. I'm thinking here particularly about young people with those SEMH support needs, but it's not uniquely to that group, obviously. The fifth point we would make is the importance of in-learning and work support. One of the things we found in the analysis that we've been doing for the SEMH report is that a lot of those young people who are spending time NEET are doing so after going into further education. So they're going from school into a mainstream FE opportunity, and then they're dropping out. So they're not just at risk of NEET, you know, as they come into that transition, even post-transition, when they're in education provision or training provision, they are also remain at risk of becoming NEET. So there needs to be plans and initiatives in place in order to support those young people, even once they're into education provision. Multi-agency, but easy to navigate. I think we need come up with a better phrase for that. But what that's really meaning is that obviously multiple agencies are involved in this, and there needs to be really good coordination, particularly around data sharing. We still find that a lot of authorities really struggle with getting data sharing right, and data sharing in the way that best supports the delivery of timely and good quality support to young people. So acknowledging that there are multiple agencies, but making sure that there's a plan in place for those to be working together effectively, particularly around sharing data. It's not just around sharing data, but that is a really, we think, an important component. Seventh one is bridge the gap opportunities. So this is really about re-engagement and acknowledging that young people who've been out of education and training for a period of time, it's going to be very difficult for them just to jump straight back into it. So it's about having lots of opportunities for those young people to go and try and test out and what those opportunities are to figure out what's going to work best for them. And then the eighth one is holistic support. So this is, I think, acknowledging that it's not just employment and employability support that a lot of those young people are going to need. It's also wider sort of life skills and resilience is going to be required in order for them to be able to re-engage with education and to thrive and continue on those pathways. So those are our 8. I've gone through them very, very hurriedly here in the interest of time, but I think the purpose is just to share the thinking around this and sharing why we think it's really important. And then our next steps for us is so first of all, to refine the draft benchmarks. These are still in draft, so how can we make them better? How can we improve them? Are they the right ones? Are there things we should be adding, or can we sharpen them in some way? I think the next important thing is about developing the assessment criteria. So those of you who are familiar with Gatsby benchmarks will know that, you know, beneath each of those 8 headings, you have criteria that support your self-assessment as a school or college, so you can see how well you're doing. And for here, it would be, I guess, it would be a assessment criteria for local authorities and other agencies that are involved in providing that support, where you could then go through and say, well, do we have that? Do we have that in this way? Where do we sit in that sort of in that benchmark for each of those 8? And then the final thing that ideally we would like to do is be able to pilot and test that. So to put those benchmarks into place, use those assessment criteria in a number of authorities, and see where each authority is up to, but also through trying to apply them, do we see is it having a positive impact on young people's movement into education and training post 16? So that's obviously a longer term ambition. And at the moment, we're taking that forward with the 8 authorities that we work with in the Northwest, or we'd like to. But obviously, there's we think real potential here for greater impact if this became a sort of wider initiative and a national initiative. So, but that's our thinking at the moment. And at the moment, we work in 8 authorities, and that's where we're trying to take this forward as much as we can. But we are hopeful that this could become a wider thing that others want to come and work with us on. So I think that's the end of my. I think that is my last slide. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and if there's any questions, I'm very happy to take them. I hope I didn't take up too long there, Jack.
We've already got a couple of hands up, so are you happy to just take them?
Yeah, I didn't see who was. Oh, they're in order, aren't they? So I think it's Cheryl and then Catherine. So Cheryl.
Sorry, so I'm unmuting there. So yeah, just a couple of questions, Gary. This all sounds amazing. And so my background, I'm a careers advisor that goes into a couple of local secondary schools within the Lancashire area. So first of all, I'm wondering, is Lancashire one of the local authorities that you work with?
It's not, no.
It's not. Okay.
No.
So I can see from my practitioner experience, I can see all the good work that schools are trying to do independently. So they all have sort of, but I also see from what you're saying, it's really good to kind of get a kind of joined up vision for what's going on, and this idea of sharing best practice, and this all sounds really good. They're all very much involved in using the Gatsby benchmarks, so they're very familiar and sort of adhere to all this. So you've talked about them, you sort of work with local authorities. How is this going to be, or how do you think it's going to be translated through to actual practical use in schools, for example?
So I think some of this obviously does link to schools. So if you're looking about, I think the main one for me is around that early identification, and then I guess also about sharing of data. So where we see practice working really well is in authorities where schools and the authority, the post-16 provision and the pre-16 provision is really working very closely together to do that sort of early identification of risk and need, and it's the authority then coming in and working with the school to provide that sort of enhanced support. And you have those really good data sharing practices in place that enable that. So for us, it would be, we see that and we think, well, if you had some mechanism by which that could be, others could see the benefits of that and how it works. And also, I think oftentimes it's not just the understanding something in principle, but in practice, how it's actually been done, because that's what people want to know. Like, how do I actually do that here? So what was the you know, what was the data sharing agreement that you actually use? Can we actually see that? And how do we, you know, how do we translate that from your context to ours? So we think that a set of benchmarks would, as it has done with we think with Gatsby, we also work in schools, so we have some experience of that as well, is that the benchmarks actually drive that kind of behavior, because you get to see where you are against others, and two, you have that immediately. You ask, well, how did they get to there then? How can we do that in our area, or in our, you know, how can we adjust our practice to make sure that we're achieving the same results? So that's how we see it working. I don't have a sort of brilliantly thought through plan beyond that, sorry, but that's, you know, it's more the principles of, as you were saying, you know, Gatsby's been done really well in schools, and so it's like, okay, that seems like a really good approach. So how could we take that set of principles and apply it to this other set of services for young people at risk of need?
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No, thank you for your question. I think it's Catherine next.
Hi, I've just turned my camera on because it's weird, isn't it, when you're answering a question and you can't see this on. I'm the strategic lead at Citizens Advice for Welfare and Employment. But in previous roles, I was the lead trustee on Talent Match in Greater Manchester, and the hidden young people work that we did. And that stemmed over, gosh, it must have been like 7 or 8 years, actually. And I also did some work in schools with Salford Council, and like, you might know Debbie Abrahams if you're working, if that's one of the areas that you're working in. And we've been looking at this. I've been sitting talking about like holistic support for young people, the kind of things that they need. So this is perfect. So hi, Graham. So I think one of the things that, is how do we work with you on this? Because obviously I've got a national footprint, and my role is to think about what really good advice to young people looks like, and how we make sure that they don't fall through the cracks. All the stuff we know, like young people needing like really consistent relationships with adults around them that like provide them with what they need. Someone said in a roundtable recently, it's almost like you have to think about things they might not have in their life if they're high risk or they're vulnerable. I'm going to try not to use that word, but I think so. Yeah, my question is like, how can we work with you? Is there an opportunity for us to collaborate, even people who might be in this group, and help support you? Because this is exactly, if we're thinking about those youth hubs that they're creating, my argument was like, this work needs to start in year 9.
Yes.
Do you know, like what we found is that and young people almost need like a passport of like how they're going to be supported up to the age of 24. Like we need a roadmap that like goes across and thinks about all of those transitions and thinks about like care leavers and young carers. I was a Senko kid, so I know what it's like trying to enter college and then higher education, and like and I can't believe I made it, to be honest. So I think, like, how can we support you and work with you?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, part of the reason for doing this today was to sort of raise awareness of it and hopefully encourage people to be in touch. So if you're working in an area where we work, that's obviously much easier to figure out. So I would say be in touch, and then it may be that, it sounds like not, but maybe for some services, our teams are already working with you. And I think what I'm keen to sort of stress is that the need for the benchmarks isn't because there isn't good practice out there. It's because there is really good practice out there, but it's just not being applied systematically. And I think part of the reason for that is because the information and knowledge is just not transferring from one area to another. So it just, there's great things happening, but it just stays very localized. So it's about, one of the things I think that has really worked with Gatsby is that it's been a mechanism for ensuring that good practice does sort of become good practice at scale. So I would say I don't have like a really well thought through plan of exactly how we could work together, but I would say please be in touch, and that's partly one of the reasons for doing that today. And then we can figure out sort of how we're working in that area, and then what we could possibly do together. But yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons we want to start doing this in the 8 areas where we're working is to get some of that that practical application in place and start to do it, because I think that's always much better for learning than sort of just talking about it in the abstract.
Fantastic. I'm just waiting to see if there's any more last minute questions. I don't think we've had any in the chat. So last chance to put your hand up. If not, we will move on to the next agenda item. Thanks a lot, Gary.
Yeah.
That was a really insightful presentation, and thanks for covering off some of the points about the data as well. That I think it's really good that everyone's sort of staying up to date with that.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot. Up next on the agenda, we have Sam Mead from Resurgo, and Resurgo won our Youth Employment Award in December, just before Christmas. So we're very proud to have them here today presenting on the programme that won that award. So I will hand over to Sam.
Jack, thank you so much. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come and join you guys and hear from each other. And the first thing to do is just an encouraging thing to be on the call, isn't it? And see that there's so many people trying to do some really good stuff in this space. Even when those figures come in and they look pretty dark and gloomy, it's encouraging to be on calls with people that are all trying to see hope and trying to bring hope to these young people that we're working with. Before I get into presentation, just want to do a big shout out to Ben at Impetus. Impetus have helped us so much in our journey. As Ben said, we partnered with for 10 years, and it's way more than just a funding opportunity. The kind of high support, high challenge expertise they bring alongside that in helping you design and deliver programs that are going to have long-term sustainable outcomes, and lots of the opportunities and doors that have been opened have come through that partnership we've had with Impetus. So if anyone's thinking about it, I would highly recommend that partnership with those guys. So today I've got Jack invited us along to talk a little bit about what we do on the SPEAR program, which is our primary pre-employment initiative that we deliver, but also just to share some of our learnings of what that journey's been like as we've kind of developed that program after the last 20 years. And hopefully there's some questions there that will help you think about the way you're delivering your programs, but also, again, that kind of sharing best practice across the space. We want to make sure we're hearing from each other and how best others are facing some of the challenges that we're seeing today in the youth employment space. My name's Sam. I've been working for Resurgo for the last 10 years, initially as a coach on the program. So I did 3 years delivering the SPEAR program, and then 7 years ago moved across into the impact world. So now head of impact and oversee and manage the impact management of the programs that we deliver. So we're really excited to be able to share some of that with you today. So let me just share my screen and make sure that's working. Brilliant. Here we go. Let me just I'm going to stop sharing because I know this. Do that. So who are we? Who is Resurgo? Who is SPEAR? So Resurgo is the kind of charity name, and SPEAR is the program that we deliver in partnership with 17 different organisations across the UK. We have 17 centres spread around the UK, working with 16 to 24-year-olds who are facing barriers to get into work. And I think what I just highlight at this point is that, and it's a theme that seems to be emerging from some of the, what Gary was talking about earlier, and some of the questions and conversations that have been happening, this idea of this holistic approach to youth pre-employment, rather than it just being like, what are the skills that they need, or the hard skills like mock interviews, CVs, cover letters, all the things that people naturally think about when it comes to pre-employment. Actually, we find the most impactful things for us are the attitudinal shift and the behaviour patterns that are holding young people back, and helping to work with young people to challenge some of those patterns or challenge some of those attitudes and come alongside them and journey with them in that. So as I said, we've now worked with over 10,000 young people across the UK in the last 20 years. And you can see by the map there, we've got centres across the UK, primarily starting in London and now starting to spread more across the UK. So I thought in a pure impact way, like this is my day job. So I thought what I'd do is I'd kind of talk you through three core elements of our program, but using the theory of change a model as a way of doing that. So firstly, kind of that target population, really identifying who are we here to serve and how do we know who that is. Then talking a little bit about some of those activities that we deliver. So what does the program actually look like? And then finally landing on some of those outcomes. So what is the meaningful change that we're seeing in the young people that we're working with? So who is the programme for? Target population for us is a really important thing. We want to make sure that we're working with the people that really need this, but also that we're not working with people who we just don't have the resources or the skill set to work with. So what we did when we first went through our theory of change process was really kind of home in on this target population. And I'd encourage anyone who's in that process or thinking about this, this is such a helpful exercise to do when really designing and targeting your programs to work with those who really need it. So for us, some of the key criteria is the young person has to be unemployed, age 16 to 24, actively seeking employment. It seems silly maybe to put it there as a point, but it is a really important point in terms of someone's journey into employment. It's really hard to work with young people who don't want to get a job, and there are opportunities to coach and work that through with young people, but it's got to come from them. We don't take anyone onto the program who's been kind of mandated onto the program, because we find actually it just doesn't work in terms of some of those opportunities. Eligible to work, conversational English, and then in terms of identifying who are the people that really need the program, trying to get a sense of what are the barriers that they're facing, and knowing that actually if they're facing some of these barriers listed here, we're working with the right group of young people who really need the support. And as I said, we really want to make sure that we're not kind of just cherry picking those who are close to the workforce and just need that little push over the edge, while also recognizing what's the kind of spaces that we can operate in and where are the skill sets that we lie. So for example, mental health challenges, I'm sure on this call, lots of people have seen the uptick in mental health challenges that young people are facing. And we recognise that there's only so much that we can do in that space. And actually, there's other services that are out there that are more relevant and more appropriate for the young people at that point. So I think that's something that really this process helps us to do, is identify who are those people that we can work with. I guess one thing that I would love to kind of get people's thoughts on, and please chuck them into the chat, is even with this kind of low to medium mental health challenges, one of the things we're really aware of is how do we really protect our teams in those situations. We employ people that have got a big heart for young people and want to see the social transformation. The problem with that is that then they can take on lots of those kind of challenges and kind of really feel that, and that is something that we're finding in our team at the moment. So if anyone's got any good resources or ways of kind of managing their teams through that, would love to kind of hear from that at some point, whether that's today or another opportunity. So that's kind of who we work with, and this gives a bit of a sense of that if you then break it down by those barriers there. So on the left, you can see the number of barriers that we see trainees kind of who enroll on the program come with, and you can see there that most trainees are coming with over 3 barriers onto the program, and an average of 3.7. And then on the right there, you can then see what some of those barriers are. And as I said, mental health challenges, for example, 41% of trainees kind of self-disclose mental health challenges. Almost 50% have got less than 5 GCSEs. A huge range of things going on there in the lives of the young people that we work with. So one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to make the program as accessible for these different challenges as possible. So to give you a sense of what that looks like, we've got 2 kind of versions of the program that we currently deliver. One, which is our kind of classic model, which I'm going to be talking a bit more about today, and then our streamlined version, which is a newer low intensity, low cost model that we're currently piloting in a few centres across the UK. But we recruit kind of 15 young people onto the program. That comes from various referral agencies, whether that's Job Centre, whether that's council support teams, whether that's social services, whether that's friends and family referrals into the program, but aiming to recruit 15 young people for the classic version. And then it's an intense 6 weeks of work that we do with them during Sphere Foundation. The core kind of, I guess, the USP for us as an organisation is that we deliver coaching. All of what we do is coaching. We take lots of the learning experience from the executive coaching world and apply that within the pre-employment context, working with young people. The idea being here that we're trying to kind of build skills and resilience, particularly in mindsets for the young people, and all our team are trained coaches. And I know coaching kind of has this interesting reputation. Some people are really for it. Other people, I think there's been some stories out there that kind of paint it as this kind of like way of mind, kind of, what's the word, I can't even think about, brainwashing people into kind of doing a way of thinking. Actually, for us, coaching is all about journeying with these young people, coming alongside of them, identifying their needs, seeing where we can support them, where we can challenge them and move them out of their comfort zones. And then after we've done that first 6 weeks, where they're coming into the session kind of 4 times a week, 3 group sessions, 1-1-1, we then deliver 12 months of ongoing career support. And again, that was something that we identified for our theory of change. We got challenged at that point to say, you're basically leaving your trainees at the point of greatest need, at the point when they've actually kind of got their motivation to the highest, they feel really ready to go. And actually, if you just let them go at that point, you're kind of pushing them off a cliff. So that's where we built in this Spear Career part of our program to kind of partner and again continue to offer that support to young people, not just once they're working while they're looking for work, but then also beyond that. So what does it look like in terms of what our outcomes, and how do we measure? How do we know what we're doing works? Part of this is kind of a short-term outcome scale, which is called our work readiness indicators. And this came about during about 10 years ago, when we realized that we were getting to the end of a program and we were kind of looking at the groups and saying, oh, anecdotally, this group looks really work ready. But what does it actually mean to be work ready? There's so much that goes into that beyond just having a CV, a cover letter, the ability to do interviews. And that's where we built out these indicators saying, actually, if I was an employer, what would I be looking for in a young person to say, yeah, actually, they're ready for work? So we developed these short-term outcome scales in partnership with some employers, and then we've kind of go through a few iterations over the years, but landed on these kind of 5 core areas of work readiness. And as I said, because we want to focus in on the mindsets, that's why we put attitude at the top. And then thinking about, what does confident communication look like? What does professional behavior look like? What does self-leadership look like? And lastly, mindfulness of others. And actually, this is such a helpful tool for us as we go through delivering the program, and has really helped our teams and our young people to understand what is work readiness. And this is how we kind of track it as we go throughout the program. We get our coaches to fill this in on a daily basis as they're delivering the program. And actually, it's just a really helpful coaching tool, we find, firstly, for our teams to get a really good understanding of what are some of those challenges that young people are facing. How do you work with a young person through them? And how do you set really good goals and tangible goals for that young person as they go through it? And that speaks to the kind of like holistic approach that we want to take to work readiness, moving beyond the skills approach there. And we've had this externally validated by the Tavistock Institute, and it's shown to be a really good predictor of whether someone is able to get into work as well. So that's why it's not just a helpful tool for our coaches in the moment, but it's allowing them to see actually how likely, if a trainee continues on this current trajectory, are they to get into work in the future, and how can they bring some of that high support and high challenge and bring trainees out of their shell there. And then in terms of our outcomes, this is just a sense of kind of where we are at the moment. You'll see here the light red bars represent the percentage of trainees that we keep in touch with, so our known rates beyond the program. And this is something that we are really proud of. It's something that we work really hard to do. And lots of this is just through the relationships that the coaches are building with the young people during that first 6 weeks actually means that they're able to continue those relationships well beyond that 6 weeks into the year. So 91% of our trainees we're still in touch with a year after they complete Sphere Foundation. And that also just gives us real confidence in our outcomes, and that actually, even if we don't know where that 9-10% are, we can assume they're going to follow a pretty close it's a very similar trajectory as the rest of the cohort here. So you can see we kind of go really hard in that first 3 months. Our main goal is that we want to try and get people into work as quickly as possible. So that's 53% of our trainees enter work within the first 3 months after completing the program. And then the kind of sustainability point, we want to make sure that most of them are staying there. So you can see the uptick between 3 and 12 isn't that big, but actually for us, that's just as important, as it highlights the trainees that we're working with are getting a job and keeping a job. Which we all know the difference work makes in the long run, not just for having a job, but all of the other benefits that roll off it. And that's the kind of stuff that we're really interested in. We want to know, what does a trainee's life look like in 5 years' time if they have a job? What difference does it make to their self-esteem? What difference is it making to their families? What difference is it making for their aspirations for the future? Like, work is a vessel to carry all of that. And that's where we go really hard after work. That's the thing that we really want to see shift in young people and in their lives. External evaluations, that's something that I feel really passionate about. I think it's one thing to say like use our own data and our own analysis to look at what we're doing, take our learnings from it, apply it to our programs, to communicate what we're doing through forums like this, but actually to kind of hold ourselves to a higher bar, to know that our young people can trust that the program that they're going to go on is going to have a positive impact on their life is really important for us. And that's why we're always pushing to hold that higher bar. So as I said, in 2017, we had the work readiness indicators externally validated, and they were shown to be predictive of work readiness, but also they showed that trainees are significantly more work ready than the program, which is a really positive thing for us. Then in 2019, with Impetus, we partnered with them around the longitudinal educational outcomes to look at that data set and to understand kind of over time what difference does the program make. And you can see here again that SPEAR trainees were 3 times more likely to be in worker education 3 months after the program compared to a control group. I think the evaluation that I wanted to speak most about today is the Department for Work and Pensions data labs. Firstly, as a huge advocate for it, it's such a good resource to have available to the employment space. And I'd really encourage you, if you haven't looked at this or considered it, please do, because to have this available to us at a free cost, like firstly, that's a really important thing, but also again, to continue raising the bar about what works in the youth employment space and the employment space more generally, and have an opportunity to share learnings from across the board. This is a really great way to do that. I sit on the advisory panel now, so if anyone's got any questions about it, please do kind of reach out to me. I'd love to kind of chat to you a bit more about it. But the data labs allows you to create as close a comparison group of real life individuals who didn't complete your programs without doing an RCT. So it's not quite the gold standard randomized controlled trial, but it's as close as you can get to it without doing one of those. And for us, this was a really encouraging exercise. You can see here, it showed that the program was statistically significant and it reduces the chances of being neat after a year by 17%. But as I said, for us, more importantly, it also identified some blind spots for us in terms of where we could be doing better with particular groups. So again, would massively advocate for this, would be really up for chatting to people if you'd like to hear a little bit more about our experiences of it and what it might look like for you. But I think there's a responsibility there for us in this space to be holding ourselves to this level so that we can really say to the young people that we work with, we are serving you to the best of our ability, and we can make the changes and the improvements on our programs where we need to. Okay, so that's quite a lot of me talking about our outcomes, but I thought what I'd also do today is just share a bit of a story of a young person who completed our program in Leeds earlier in the year. So there's kind of a 5-minute video kind of talking about their story of what their experiences of the program were like and what life was like before and what life was like afterwards, just to bring it all to life a little bit and hopefully bring some of that hope that I think we're probably all longing for at the moment when it comes to youth unemployment. So here we go. Let me just share that and hopefully the sound will come through as well.
They was doing like cooking, drinking 6 times a week. I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognise myself anymore. I lost myself, I lost the person, I lost John. I lost the person who it was. My dad wasn't the greatest man at the time. I was drinking. There were some other things which weren't shared. Four of my siblings, one were too old for care, so we all got split up for a bit. When I was in foster care, I went through some abuse with the foster carer's nephew. The person got away with it. I sometimes still see him. I think even now, I've seen him like 5 times. Every time I see him, I go to that little boy again, you know. Yeah. Sometimes the easiest way out, rather than getting up and talking, just hide yourself behind the closed doors. You know, try and get over it, you know. Just got drugs and drink. One night, just drinking and doing drugs 3 nights consistently. You know, at the time, it actually made me feel worse. It took me too long to realise. I think after 4 years, I thought, I'm done. I want to make a change. Got clean. I thought, do you know what? I want to make my life good and succeed. That's when I decided to, no, enough. I picked up the phone. Luckily, you know, just very coach picked up. I think my social worker told me about it. I wasn't working at the time. So why did you try and start? Well, I'll give it a go. But I think that first day was just comfort zone, which I never thought I could do, you know. So that was the start of a brand new person, a brand new confidence, which I didn't know I had. I worked on my personal skills and helped my leadership so much more. I knew how to talk to people, but I didn't know how to frame my questions or my ideas. All the interior things I learned, all thanks to the spear coaches. The last day of the course, someone called me a role model, which was really exciting. Before spear, I didn't do anything. I didn't see the point of talking to anyone. Give me more of a experience, meeting new people, and actually being happy. So that gave me the strength and energy to carry on work a job and do well. I got offered a 2-week trial, and on my 4th day, they said, "Can you come in for an interview?" So me and my 3 bosses went out for lunch. He goes, "We'd love to offer you the job." So not only did I get a job, I got a free meal. When I first started, I was doing like cleaning, doing the offices, bathroom for the school. But now I'm doing a bit of caretaking full time, and sometimes I help out on the Sunday or the Saturday. 40 hours or more a week, and get on with everyone. I feel like part of the family now. It's such a privilege to be happy and doing stuff. I just want to prove that I'm really good, and I just want everyone to be proud of what I can do. I'm more proud than what I thought I would be. Yeah, I'm really proud. I think I went to my family. I've always wanted more, dreamed of more, just to have no worries, just to live in a, worry-free life, a home where just full of love and happiness, and no struggle. And there's people who I love and admire around me. That's what I want. At the start of Spear, I had a goal of just being able to treat myself to a meal. You know, I didn't realise how big I could dream at the start, so I just started a bit small. And at the end of the course, my dream was to own my own flat.
There we go. Well, I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour of kind of what we do. But every time I watch that video, I'm always inspired by John. I've had the privilege to meet him a few times, and just having that opportunity to sit down with him and to hear about his hopes, his dreams, what he wants for the future, is such an amazing way just to kind of partner with a young person in that, rather than just kind of telling them how to do it, having the opportunity to journey with them to offer them the high support, offer them the high challenge that comes alongside that, and work with them in that way. It's just such a privilege. And I hope that offers, I'm sure we've all got stories of young people we're working with, and a young person comes to mind as we're watching that. But I hope that offers you an encouragement as to the work that you're doing and others are doing is really making a difference in these young people's lives, and what an incredible role models they can be for us as well. So just to kind of wrap up, I think just to kind of share what's next for us as Resurgo, we are looking to grow and increase our presence across the UK. So that's something that we're looking to do over the next few years. We've got this streamlined model that I talked about, which is a slightly lower dosage, lower cost version of the programme that we're currently going through a bit of an evaluation stage of working through how that's going to work. And we've got some centres that are already delivering that and get some really early encouraging signs from that, but want to continue to make sure, following good impact practice, that we're doing what we said we want to do and managing the impact of that and constantly feeding back into the development of that programme. And then I know this is a very kind of common theme, I think, across the space, is this idea of what do quality outcomes look like, or quality work look like, recognizing the increase in work poverty. It's not just enough now to say a young person has a job. We've really got to dig into, like, what does a good job look like for them? And there's some really good stuff out there, but for us, we want to keep researching and building evidence off the back of our young people. So I'll leave it there. I've got my kind of contact details on the slides, which I'm sure we'll send around. And if you want to connect in person as well, we've got our impact report launch coming up on Tuesday, the 25th of March in London. So if you're free and about and want to, I'll be there. Some of the other team will be there. If you'd like to connect or like to just come out and hear a little bit more, please do kind of reach out to me, or the impact address is there, and I will share that on the chat as well afterwards. So thanks very much. Thanks, Jack, for inviting us along. I hope there's been some good kind of things there for people to get their teeth into, and we'll leave it there. I think there's some questions in the chat as well, and I'm very happy to take those.
Yeah, we've also got one hand up as well. So
should we get? Well, let's get Cheryl first, and then I can answer some of the ones in the chat.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, I'm just waiting for my camera. You can hear me. I'm just waiting for my camera to start. You'll be able to see. Oh, there we go. My camera started now. And yeah, it sounds amazing, and I completely agree. I work with young people, and I agree. You know, we talk a lot about the practical side, CVs and letters, and that sort of, you know, practical bit of getting a job. But the attitudes and behaviours are so important, and that, you know, predates any of the sort of practical thing. So I was just wondering, your age group focus, as you said, is 16 to 24. Things like this, I feel, need to start, you know, before that, as they're in school. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, you know, things starting at year 9, for example. Are you looking to develop anything sort of similar to this that catches them earlier than 16?
I would say probably at the moment, no. Would be my first reaction to that. I think recognizing where our sweet spot is as an organisation, and the way the programme is currently designed and constructed, we think actually 16 to 24-year-old is the space that we want to operate in. Now, that doesn't mean we, like, in an ideal world, we don't exist, right? That's the kind of goal that we'd like to get to, is that in 20 years' time, you don't need pre-employment for 16 to 24-year-olds, because there is really good stuff in that early intervention space. And we think there's other people who are better placed to do that. I know we've worked with some of the other charities on the kind of impetus portfolio who are doing that stuff as well. Think Forward comes to mind as an organisation that are doing that really well. So I think we just want to recognise where our sweet spot is at the moment. For us, that's this space. And until there's a time when we're not needed, I think we're going to push into that and keep doing that, rather than maybe look a little bit earlier. But I just said the need is definitely there. And it's definitely important that there is provision that exists there earlier. So we're more than happy to have conversations with people working in that space to speak into what are some of the challenges or the things that we see emerge in the 16 to 24-year-old group that could be fed back into some of the earlier age provision that exists there as well.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can see there's a question from Cheryl as well, Thompson Davies, around, do you have a youth member on your board? We don't have a youth member as such, in that, not someone who's currently on the programme, but one of our trustees is a previous trainee on the programme. So he completed the programme about kind of 5 or 6 years ago, and now sits on our board, which is great to have his insight, his challenge to what his experience of the programme. We also have a youth advisory board that's kind of not our board per se, but is it kind of an opportunity for us to work with trainees who have done the program before, to hear from their experiences, and they speak into things like curriculum design. We have them in on interviews for coaches who are going to be employed to do the program. So youth voice is really important for us. It's something we're trying to get better at. So we're kind of redesigning the way that we collect qualitative data off the back of the program as well, and feed that back into the way the program is designed. So that is something that we're really keen to kind of push more into.
Great, thank you so much, Sam. That was a really interesting presentation. We've still got some time, so if there's any other questions, please put your hand up. If not, we'll sort of start wrapping up, which leads me to just say thank you very much to everyone who's spoken today. I think it's been a really good edition of the forum, really collaborative, and people sharing best practice that we're doing in different areas of the country, which is what this forum's all about. We're really trying to get back to making sure this runs basically on the first Monday of every month. So in light of that, if you're an ERSA member and you have anything that you think you could bring to this forum, any presentations you'd like to make, please drop me an email. I'll put my email address in the chat. In terms of this forum, I'll be uploading the recording to YouTube and making sure that gets sent out alongside the slides from the two presentations today. So watch out for that in your inboxes. Other than that, thanks again to the speakers, and thanks to all of you for attending, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks so much.